viewers to MindWell. Important little note, if you're new to these online sessions, and which is kind of hard to believe in today's world, but please find the chat, and we're going to use the chat to help stay engaged. So you can always use the chat, ask a question. We're going to make it as interactive as possible. We've got a really special guest, Richard Gerlin, who's going to be taking us through this 90-minute training session. And we're also going to be online to help support any questions that come up and respond to them in either real time. We'll bring them up to Richard, or we'll save them towards the end. But we want to hear your voices. We want to hear your thoughts and reflections as we go through. A little note to say that we will follow up after the session. We'll send a recording with highlights from the session and some more information about follow-up. So that will be coming your way. And finally, I just want to do a quick shout out to all the different members that helped promote this session. We had a wide response. We're really stoked to have representation in first responders from right across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. So we're really grateful to our partners at the Toronto Police Service who did a great job in helping to get the word out for that and getting it out to their community. We're really excited about our partnership, working with them and bringing training to their organization. We've got representation in Edmonton and New Brunswick and Guelph and Calgary, and Vancouver. So really excited to have such a diverse group right across the country that we're bringing together, as well as to a shout out to our MindWell team, as well as Richard for helping to share the word through our channel. So we're excited that you heard about us. And without further ado, I'm going to bring you Richard, who's a real pro star in this area, in addition to his rich history of working in the field as a first responder and a police officer. I'll let him get into that background. He's also a certified mindfulness teacher. So that's a big deal these days. So you got to know that you're in the hands of somebody that you can trust, and I'm going to hand it over to him to get us going.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Yeah, a good day here. Good day in America, and a good day to be training with you. So I want to start out by just telling you a little bit about me. So I spent 24 years in civilian law enforcement down here in the States, and I retired as a police lieutenant. And I spent the last 15 years of my career really exploring occupational stress and trauma and human performance, and looking for skills training and knowledge training that could really make a difference in how we navigate the arc of our career. And that led me to neuroscience, which led me to mindfulness skills training. And so we're going to talk about mindfulness skills training. We're going to maybe demystify or maybe, confront some of the myths around mindfulness and practice some mindfulness. So let's get started. So I want to guide you through a meditation practice. This is called the Mountain Meditation Practice. It was developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn from the University of Massachusetts Medical School. We often refer to John as kind of the father of secular mindfulness here in North America. And he may not like that, but that's kind of how we refer to him. He scripted this meditation practice. So this is a meditation practice that is a combination of mindfulness, which we'll talk about, and it's a combination of maybe a little bit of sports psychology and visualization, okay? And it's heavily scripted, so it's pretty easy to sit and listen to this practice. So here's the instruction, the invitation, maybe is a better way of framing it, is wherever you are, assuming, if you're a first responder operator, assuming you're in a safe place to bring your attention to a meditation practice, just begin with a couple of deeper breaths than normal. And you can close your eyes if you're comfortable with that, or you can keep your eyes open. And if you choose to keep your eyes open, maybe just find some place to fix a nice relaxed gaze, maybe on the floor in front of you, on a wall, desk, doesn't matter. And as we're doing this, maybe relaxing the muscles on our face, relaxing the jaw, relaxing the shoulders, and sitting or standing or lying down, whatever posture you're in, with a nice tall spine. So really just elongating that spine. What that's doing for us is opening up this muscular skeletal region in our chest to allow us to breathe with maximum efficiency. And this meditation practice is normally done in a sitting position, either on the floor or a chair. And we begin by sensing into the support that you have from the chair or floor beneath you, paying attention to the actual sensations of contact, and creating a position of stability and poise, your upper body balanced over your hips, and shoulders in a comfortable but alert posture. Hands on your lap or your knees, and your arms hanging by their own weight, like heavy curtains, stable and relaxed. Actually sensing into the body, feeling your feet, your legs, your hips, your lower and upper body. And when you're ready, allowing your eyes to close or a nice relaxed open gaze, and bringing awareness to the breath, to the actual physical sensations, feeling each breath as it comes in and goes out. And letting the breath just be as it is, without trying to change it or regulate it in any way. Allowing the breath to flow easily and naturally, with its own rhythm and pace. And knowing that you're breathing perfectly well right now, nothing for you to do. Allowing the body to be still and sitting with a sense of dignity, a sense of resolve, a sense of being complete, whole in this very moment, with your posture reflecting this sense of wholeness. And as you sit here, letting an image form in your mind's eye of the most magnificent or beautiful mountain that you know or have seen or can imagine. Letting it gradually come into greater focus. Even if it doesn't come as a visual image, allowing the sense of this mountain and feeling its overall shape, its lofty peak or peaks high in the sky, the large base rooted in the bedrock of the Earth's crust, its steep or gently sloping sides. Noticing how massive it is, how solid, how unmoving, how beautiful, whether from afar or up close. Perhaps your mountain has snow blanketing its top and trees reaching down to the base, or rugged granite sides. There may be streams and waterfalls cascading down the slopes. There may be one peak or a series of peaks. Observing the mountain, noting its qualities, and when you feel ready, seeing if you can bring the mountain into your own body, so that your body and the mountain in your mind's eye become one. So that as you sit here, you share in the massiveness and the stillness and the majesty and strength of the mountain. You become the mountain, grounded in your sitting posture. Your head becomes the lofty peak, supported by the rest of the body and affording a panoramic view. Your shoulders and arms, the sides of the mountain. Your buttocks and legs, the solid base. Rooted to your cushion or your chair, experiencing in your body a sense of uplift from deep within your pelvis and spine. with each breath, as you continue sitting, becoming a little more a breathing mountain, alive and vital, yet unwavering in your inner stillness, completely what you are, beyond words and thought, a centered, grounded, unmoving presence. As you sit here, becoming aware of the fact that as the sun travels across the sky, the light and shadows and colors are changing virtually moment by moment in the mountain's stillness. And the surface teems with life and activity, streams, melting snow, waterfalls, plants, and wildlife. As the mountain sits, seeing and feeling how night follows day and day follows night. The bright, warming sun, followed by the cool night sky studded with stars, and the gradual dawning of a new day. Through it all, the mountain just sits, experiencing change in each moment, constantly changing, yet always just being itself. It remains still as the seasons flow into one another, as the weather changes moment by moment and day by day, calmness abiding all change. In summer, there is no snow on the mountain, except perhaps for the very peaks or in crags, shielded from direct sunlight. In the fall, the mountain may wear a coat of brilliant fire colors. In winter, a blanket of snow and ice. In any season, the mountain may find itself at times enshrouded in clouds or fog, or pelted by freezing rain. People may come to see the mountain and comment on how beautiful it is, or how it's not a good day to see the mountain, that it's too cloudy or rainy or foggy or dark. None of this matters to the mountain, which remains at all times its essential self. Clouds may come and clouds may go. Tourists may like it or not. The mountain's magnificence and beauty are not changed one bit by whether people see it or not, seen or unseen in sun or clouds, broiling or frigid, day or night. The mountain just sits, being itself. At times visited by violent storms, buffeted by snow and rain, and winds of unthinkable magnitude. Through it all, the mountain sits. Spring comes, trees leaf out, flowers bloom in the high meadows and slopes, birds sing in the trees once again. Streams overflow with the waters of melting snow. And through it all, the mountain continues to sit. Unmoved by the weather, by what happens on its surface, by the world of appearances, remaining its essential self through the seasons, the changing weather, the activity ebbing and flowing on its surface. In the same way, as we sit in meditation, we can learn to experience the mountain. We can embody the same central, unwavering stillness and groundedness in the face of everything that changes in our own lives over seconds, over hours, over years. In our lives and in our meditation practice, we can experience constantly the changing nature of mind and body and of the outer world. And we have our own periods of light and darkness, activity and inactivity, our moments of color and our moments of drabness. It's true that we experience storms of varying intensity and violence in the outer world and in our own minds and bodies. Buffeted by high winds and cold and rain, we endure periods of darkness and pain, as well as moments of joy and uplift. Even our appearance changes constantly, experiencing a weather of its own. By becoming the mountain in our meditation practice, we can link up with its strength and stability and adopt them for our own. We can use the mountain's energies to support our energy, to encounter each moment with mindfulness and equanimity and clarity. It may help us to see that our thoughts and feelings, our preoccupations, our emotional storms and crises, even the things that happen to us, are very much like the weather on the mountain. We tend to take it all personally. but its strongest characteristic is impersonal. The weather of our own lives is not to be ignored or denied. It is to be encountered, honored, felt, known for what it is, and held in awareness. And in holding it in this way, we come to know a deeper silence and stillness and wisdom. Mountains have this to teach us, and so much more if we can allow it. The invitation now is to take a couple of deep breaths and reflect for a moment on this mountain practice. Give some consideration to where you are in this moment. And if there's one word that can describe your experience in the mountain meditation, what is it? What is that one word? Just reflect on how you might describe this present moment experience, having moved through this guided mountain meditation practice. And we're going to finish this meditation practice with some sound. So the instruction and the invitation is when you hear the sound, just bring your attention to it and listen. And see if you can bring your attention so precisely that you can notice that moment where the sound ends and the silence around it begins. And that will signal the finish of our practice. All right. Thank you for participating in that practice. So we just jumped right in. So the invitation now is to open up the chat feature and drop in your one word that describes how you're feeling after that meditation practice. And to be really clear, this isn't one word to make me feel good. It's one word just to describe how you're feeling. And we're going to see a range of experience. And that's the interesting thing about mindfulness. Maybe it's a good opportunity that there's a lot of, calm and peaceful and relaxed. That's great. We're also probably going to see, exhausted and maybe agitated. It's all a perfectly normal experience in a meditation practice. Meditation is not about relaxation. I'll say that again. Meditation is not about relaxation. It's about just paying attention to your experience. It's about bringing awareness to what am I experiencing? Okay. All right. Yeah, so thanks everybody for participating in that. Let's see if I can share my screen appropriately here. Of course, there's always technical problems. I live for technical problems. Okay. So this is one of my favorite quotes ever. Richard Strezzi Heckler is a somatic psychologist in Northern California. He's done a lot of really great work just in social justice work and in the military. He's a trainer of military special operations and mindfulness and some other things that are pretty cool. And he always says that knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the body. And so one of the things we're trying to do is teach skills in mindfulness so that we can embody these skills. And as we embody these skills, they become part of the rhythms of our life. So let's see if I can advance here. So I want to begin by talking about mindset. And before we dive into what is mindfulness and why do we want to train mindfulness, really, this is the why we train mindfulness. And it begins with mindset. Carol Dweck is a psychologist at Stanford. And Carol has done extensive research with her lab around this idea of mindset. And I'm going to kind of oversimplify some of her work, but I'm going to take it and translate it and sort of operationalize it to the first responder community, because I think it's really important to do this. She talks about two different kinds of mindsets, fixed mindset and growth mindset. So let's talk about this. A fixed mindset says that stress happens to me. So let me make that more specific. A fixed mindset says that occupational stress and trauma happen to me, right? And I need to armor up and try to avoid injury, right? And that survival is my option. In fact, if you think about it, much of our training around occupational trauma is about survival. We even use those terms, right? In context, it can be a really helpful term, yet it can drive a fixed mindset, okay? And further, fixed mindset says that when I'm injured, I'm broken and I need fixing. And this is a very common cultural mindset around occupational stress and trauma. And it does not serve us well. The data does not support that this serves us well, nor does the wisdom of the lived experience of the men and women who have served in these warrior professions, right? And so I want to offer you an alternative way of thinking, and that is a growth mindset. And a growth mindset isn't just, I'm going to shift my paradigm and I'm going to have a growth mindset. It's not a cognitive decision. It's an actionable way of being, okay? So a growth mindset says that I experience stress and trauma. Further, a growth mindset says that I understand that the data tell me, the wisdom of the lived experience tells me that if I'm going to be a first responder, I'm in a trauma profession. My job is to bear witness to human suffering and to take action to alleviate it. That's my job as a first responder, right? And I know that there's going to be some acute human suffering that I'm going to be exposed to, perhaps even on a daily basis, right? And so therefore, I'm moving into that with that understanding. And so maybe a fixed mindset might be a body language like this, and a growth mindset is a body language like this, right? So I experience stress and trauma. And what this mindset does for me is it gives me what psychologists call agency or self-efficacy, or maybe another way of framing is an internal locus of control, right? So I have a little more agency as I move through my profession of a first responder. Growth mindset also suggests that I can skillfully move through trauma. I can train for it. I can be preventive and take actions that are preventive. And I can really move through trauma skillfully. So this is in the tradecraft, right? This is in a crisis, moving through a crisis skillfully, right? And skillfully applying your tradecraft, whatever that is, policing, firefighting, medicine, whatever the case may be, right? And then when I move through it, I can take steps towards interventions. This is critically important to recover, heal, and create conditions for post-traumatic growth. And so it's not just a mindset, it's a mindset with actions, right? And we train to the mindset with mindfulness skills. Hey, Jeff, do I have the ability to, oh, there we go, thank you. So stress injury formation, this is really important. And this is some of the, really just, this slide represents the data that we don't really have time to go through, but the data that suggests, really that demonstrates very clearly that fixed mindset is just not serving us well. Here's what we know. What we know is that if you're a first responder, you will experience stress injury. We can even call it trauma injury. I use the terms interchangeably over the arc of your career, right? How's that set with you? You will experience trauma injury over the course of your career. And you know, something else is probably multiple times. And the degree of that injury, who knows, right? You'll know when it happens, I guess, is one way of looking at it. Good news is we can train before the trauma to become more skillful at being able to be in it and to move through it, right? And this requires embodied skills. Remember Strozzi Heckler's, right? Knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the body. And it requires us to take informed actions in both prevention and in response. Jeff, can we move to the next slide? And let's talk about these interventions. This is really important. So over the course of the last 15 years, I've come up with, this list of interventions, and it keeps getting longer, but these are important. So both in a preventive way and in a response to our injury, these interventions are critically important. So one of the first ones is integrated medicine. So this is going to see your medical doctor on a regular basis, right? For your annual checkup, or maybe more frequent if you need it. Get your metrics, get your numbers, right? Find out all the different body data that medical doctors want to track and see how you're doing from year to year. Okay. And it also includes other integrative health strategies. So maybe it's acupuncture, naturopathy, chiropractic, structural reintegration. There's all kinds of holistic approaches to integrated health that are critically important for us to pursue at various times during the arc of our career. The second intervention is mental health coaching. And this is just a soft way of saying psychotherapy. I've come to believe that it's critically important for us to have a mental health clinician that we see on a regular basis. And, I guess really it's one of those things, whether we think we do or not, or think we need it or not. And rather than waiting for a crisis, maybe at least experiencing some sessions with a psychotherapist, just to sort of try it out, just to see what's helpful, right? Even to use it as a coach for creating change in your life, if that's something you're interested in. The third intervention is social connection. We're wired to connect. We have to be connected with people. So it's not just social connection, but it's intentional social connection, intentionally cultivating and sustaining relationships. And these are multi-layered and complex, of course, but staying connected with the people that matter to us rather than isolating and moving away from folks, which is one of the maladaptive things that we do as first responders once stress injury sets in. The fourth intervention is the pursuit of spirit, awe, and adventure. This is where maybe a faith practice lives, if that's important to you, but it's also just where, spirituality lives. It's where this emotion of awe is located. And awe is a really, really interesting emotion. There's some really fascinating research that's coming out of the UK and out of Cal Berkeley and other places. And awe is just the ability to see the beauty in the world. And when you're in a profession where you don't see a lot of beauty, we have to intentionally pursue the light, if you will. It's really critically important. We also talk about adventure or playfulness. And this is important too, because sometimes our jobs are so serious. We stop going out and just enjoying life and having some playfulness, whether it's small ways of playfulness of hanging out with our kids or our friends, or bigger adventures, taking that vacation and just going wherever that's our own, vacation adventure. So those are 4 core interventions, and there's some others too. So movement, this is a message we get in just about every kind of training we have around health and wellness. It's just this fitness component, moving the body, and without prescribing a particular kind of movement of the body, sometimes just simply moving the body is enough, right? To keep the body engaged with the mind and the heart, okay? This is also where, if you're a CrossFitter or ultra marathon runner or hockey player or whatever, that all lives there too. Meditation is an intervention. Meditation is a skills practice. We're going to talk more about that. Critically important. And then there's these cognitive skills practices of practicing gratitude and intention setting and journaling that are really important, okay? So those are interventions. Those are sort of these domains of action, both in a preventive way and in a response to trauma injury, that are important for us to consider. Jeff, you can, I'll just real quick talk about Carl Jung. Carl Jung's one of the kind of founding fathers of modern psychology. And nearly 100 years ago, he said this: until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. So mindfulness is about training skills in awareness and compassion. It's said differently, awareness is training attention. We are bringing attention to this domain of self through mindfulness skills practice. And it's critically important. We're gonna open possibilities of noticing our thinking, noticing the nature of thoughts, the speed of thoughts, right? The volume of thoughts, and to be able to skillfully work with all of that. Whereas before we might have been numb to them, or unconscious is another way of saying that, right? Similarly, we're gonna begin to notice things in the body that are really helpful intelligence. So maybe this slide is really framing, we're gonna see data that we historically may have become numb to, that we just became blind to, we just didn't see, which is a normal kind of a stress response. It's a maladaptive stress response where we start disconnecting from ourself. All kinds of reasons for that, okay? We can move on to the next slide. That'd be great.
Would you like me to advance? You can take another try to share your screen if you prefer.
Let me take another try here. Okay, great. Okay, so mindfulness is about training attention. So there's three kinds of attention that we train to. The first one is active attention. This is focus. And you're all very familiar with this. This is where we bring attention to, we're doing a task, right? This is our task-oriented attention. And mindfulness skills trains this attention, this active attention. We're also working with passive attention, or what we might call mind wandering. There's a study out of Harvard a number of years ago that's a really great study. It's a great study because it's interesting, but it's also, it was a really good study with respect to research methods. And what they found was that 47% of the time, our minds are thinking about something else. So nearly half the time when we're engaged in our daily activities, our minds are wandering somewhere. And mind wandering is a fascinating thing. I don't want to vilify mind wandering because it really does have some value. But what we're going to do with mindfulness skills is we're going to get more proficient at noticing when mind wandering happens and going, oh, it's interesting, my mind's wandering. I'm, watching the squirrel out here. Okay, I'm going to come back, right? And then we're working with meta attention, or situational awareness, kind of a big picture awareness of what's happening around us. And that's very familiar as first responders. So not only are we training active attention, we're training meta attention, or what we might frame as situational awareness. And then we're training the ability to recognize mind wandering and come back, okay? And what we know from research is that mindfulness skills training sharpens our skills and attention. Really, really helpful. And so we're training attention, bringing these skills and attention to these domains. The first on the left here of the slide, these are the domains of self, okay? So we're going to be working with the physical body. We're going to train attention to the physical body and just notice what's going on in the body, right? How's my body feel? Not only how my body feels, but what's my body, what's my relationship to my body with things around me, right? So we're going to train what we call interoception, and we're going to train into proprioception. So understanding my body in relationship to the space and objects around me. And that's a really important skill to have as a first responder. We're going to be training in the thinking mind and emotions. So again, back to what thoughts are happening in my head at any given moment, just being more skillful at noticing those and working with that, okay? And emotions, as it relates to thoughts, or really just emotions generally, but there's a connection with emotions and thinking that's really, really fascinating, which we may touch on today, but that might be more advanced training. So thinking and emotions, the physical body. And the third domain is this affect and feeling states. And this is really, really interesting. So we've, over the course of the last few years, have separated out emotions from feeling states. And affect is that interoception that I talked about, like what's happening underneath the skin in my body. The the butterflies that we often feel, right? Or this performance anxiety that emerges. That's not an emotion. It's just your body, right? It's your sympathetic nervous system lighting up to prepare you to perform, right? And those are sort of what we refer to as affect and feeling states, and getting skillful at noticing those and working with them. And that's the idea here, is noticing what's emerging in these domains and skillfully working with them. And this is really the core of mindfulness skills training. And we're going to talk more about what I mean by that. The external domains that we're training to, one is situational awareness, right? I think that makes sense to most of us who are first responders. And then the social attunement to others, the ability to attune to others. And this is really the social intelligence, the social and emotional intelligence domain of really bringing those skills and attention to other humans is a critical skill. So these are the domains that we're training with mindfulness. Now, qualities of mindfulness. These are just four. There's arguably many qualities of mindfulness, but I think I like to keep things simple. And these four qualities that we're working with, these are difficult, folks. And so let me just kind of talk through these. The first one is this open curiosity. As I bring my attention, let's say, to my body, can I just have an open curiosity? Can I be my own scientist, right? Can I just be a trained observer of my own experience? Can I take all these skills I have as a first responder of paying attention to my outside world, and can I bring those skills internally and simply notice what's there, right? And notice what's there, moving to our second quality of mindfulness, noticing what's there with some acceptance. And part of what we're doing with mindfulness is we're paying attention to what our present moment experience. And over time, we're also paying attention to patterns, right? And these patterns are very useful. They're good intelligence that we cultivate about our own experience. And that intelligence of patterns of experience help to shape our actions towards maybe integrated medicine or psychotherapy or movement or journaling or intention setting or other interventions. But we're talking about acceptance with action, not necessarily acceptance with defeat. And I'll give you an example in just a moment. Let me cover the others. Non-judgment. This is probably one of the hardest ones for first responders to kind of wrap our brains around. Our minds are constantly thinking. You know, some scientists say we have over 100,000 independent thoughts in our mind every 24 hours. Some scientists say there's much more than that. But so I think it's easy to then, land that we have a lot of thinking going on in our head all the time. And here's the really beautiful thing and the challenging thing about mindfulness meditation is that we're not going to change that. Meditation is not about changing the activity in the mind. It's about skillfully working with the activity in the mind. And over time, we can change some patterns of thinking, but the thinking is always going to happen. Okay, so a lot of that thinking is judgmental. A lot of that thinking is we all have this inner narrative, this inner critic, and that shows up. We also learn habits, especially as first responders, of being judgmental towards other people. And these judgments do not serve us well. And there's a difference between the judgments that emerge and wise discernment. We want the wise discernment. The wise discernment is the objective, grounded decision-making that comes from our training, our experience, and the wisdom and insight that we've cultivated as a human, right? And what we're learning with mindfulness is to pay attention to sort of the baggage of the judgment, the bias that emerges, and go, yeah, I don't think I need that part. I'm just going to work with this, right? So we're vetting the judgment and holding the discernment. And that's probably a whole nother advanced training for hours and hours and maybe days, weeks, months, and years. Final is compassion, okay? Compassion is fierce, it is kind, but it is not nice, and it holds boundaries. It's just an operational way of thinking about compassion. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Compassion is not soft. Compassion is critically important for the tradecraft of the work that you do. For you to show up as an operator in the field in the middle of a crisis, if you have compassion, you will make more informed decisions. You will be more skillful in the work that you do. Your capacity to move into flow states will improve. These are pretty strong statements I'm making, right? And that compassion begins with compassion for ourselves. Let me give you an example. So I wake up in the morning, this is fictional, and I feel melancholy, right? Melancholy, scientific word for light depression, maybe. I tell cops, forgive me for the cops in the room, but it's sort of the scientific word for feeling shitty. So I'm feeling melancholy. And I wake up and I think to myself, well, that's interesting. Okay, feeling melancholy. All right, I'm going to pay attention to that, right? So I move through these qualities. I'm curious about it. I accept it. Well, I don't really want to feel melancholy, but this is my experience right now. So I'm going to accept it. And, right, it's the accept and. The and is, I'm going to accept this and I will pay attention to this today and tomorrow and for the days to follow. And I will do everything I can today not to allow my melancholy to infect the other people that I encounter. Right? So that's the acceptance with action. And then there's non-judgment. It's like, well, yeah, this happens. I mean, you know, what I know from the science and from some people I've trained with and from, you know, my tribe of warriors that I work with is that, yeah, sometimes you just have an off day. And so today's my off day, right? Rather than moving into, I'm weak, I'm less than, I'm not good enough, I knew this was going to happen. All of that nonsense, which is probably going to still show up. I can see it, notice it, take a breath, and just reject it. And that's harder to do than what I've just described, okay? And finally, some compassion. Just offering myself some compassion for, yeah, man, I'm having a bad day, right? I'm having a day that's just, yeah, this sucks. I don't want this. And I'm gonna hold some self-compassion, right? And so as I move through this mindful experience of noticing my melancholy and just getting in it, breathing into it rather than running away from it, which is frequently how we maladaptively react to discomfort. I just move through these qualities of mindfulness. Okay, it's just one example of how awareness through these qualities of mindfulness can show up when we're having a day where we just feel a little off, feel some melancholy, right? Now, maybe it's day 6 and I'm still feeling melancholy. I go through the same process and now my acceptance with action is, okay, it's day 6. All right, now I'm going to call my medical doc and make an appointment. I'm going to call my psychotherapist and make an appointment. And I'm going to call my buddy Jeff and let him know that I've just made those 2 appointments and that on Friday, after I've gone through those 2 appointments, I'm going to ask him to call me and make sure I went. If I didn't, I'm going to expect him to hold me accountable. Okay, just an example of action. We're not talking about rainbows and unicorns and everything's okay because I'm practicing mindfulness. No, this is hardcore, disciplined, compassionate action because that's what's required to do the work that we do. Okay. All right. So let's talk specifically about the actual meditation process. Now, we did a guided meditation, relatively simple because really you just had to listen to the instructions and work with mind wandering and whatnot. When we sit and do a mindfulness meditation practice that's more attention focused, this is how it works. Again, we're working skillfully with all of the thinking that's going on. We bring our active attention to, let's just say, our breath. We use the breath frequently as an anchor of attention because, one, it's really helpful. We always have our breath, so it's always there, right? And the breath also, as we take deep in breaths and out breaths, we can downregulate our sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. Said like a nerd, we can just downregulate our stress level just by breathing. So it's really helpful for 2 reasons, right? And bring our attention to our breath and immediately thinking happens, right? immediately we're going to find ourselves distracted by maybe a thought, maybe an emotion, maybe a sensation in the body, maybe some other senses, maybe sounds or some visual stimulus or whatever it is. We're going to get distracted nearly immediately. In the first second, maybe less, right? And the thing about mindfulness meditation is that that's what we want. We want the distraction. So mindfulness meditation is about focused attention. A distraction emerges. Oh, that's interesting. We bring those qualities of mindfulness. Oh, that's curious that I'm distracted by, that thought about that email I need to return. And then we go, oh yeah, this is distraction. Oh, cool. This is interesting. Okay, I'm going to come back and bring my attention back to my breath. And then boom, here's another distraction. And it might be a really ugly distraction. It might be a memory of a trauma. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. God, that's really unpleasant. Okay, but this is normal. Okay, I can accept that. I can have non-judgment around it. I don't need to wrap around the axle or something. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just how my mind works. It's how all of our minds work. Okay, I'm going to come back. Boom. And here I'm back. And we do this over and over again, so much so that we call it this mindful attention cycle. This is what meditation is all about. And it's really hard work. And it doesn't always make us feel good. It's not fun to hear that, right? So we train attention and we work with distractions skillfully, and we call that meditation. And again, we bring these qualities of mindfulness, the curiosity, the acceptance of our experience, the acceptance that we're distracted by this one thing that we just keep wanting to ruminate about and worry about, for example, or whatever it is. We have some practice of non-judgment, of like not getting wrapped around the axle of judging ourselves for not doing this good, or I suck at meditation, my mind's too busy, all these things that emerge. I just noticed that, oh, that's interesting, and I'm so judgmental. Okay, I'm going to come back to this breath awareness, focused attention, and this is what we do. Okay. So this is mindfulness meditation. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to practice. So we're going to do a short awareness of breath meditation practice. And Jeff, any questions coming up that we should maybe answer before we dive into a meditation practice?
No, I think I think we can go into the practice at this time. Good timing.
Okay, great. All right, so instructions are simple. I'm going to assume everybody's seated. It's just easier for me. So I'm sorry if you're standing, but feel free to stand, lie on the floor. Doesn't matter. Walk. You can walk and do this, I suppose, carefully. Keep your eyes open. So the instructions are to just take a couple of deeper breaths than normal. And maybe let's just be a little more specific. So let's try something a little unique with breath. As you breathe in through your nose or your mouth, you get to the very top of that in-breath. See if you can breathe in just a little bit deeper. And then allow the breath to pivot, exhale. And you get to the bottom, the bottom reach of that exhale. See if you can allow yourself to breathe out just a little bit more air. And then pivot, breathe in again, get to the top of that in-breath. See if you can breathe in just a little bit deeper. Do the same thing as you exhale. See if you can breathe out just a little bit more. And just try that for 3 or 4 breath cycles. And once you do that, just allow your breathing to find its natural rhythm once again. The invitation is to close your eyes, or if you choose to, just find a nice relaxed gaze. Let's just bring awareness to our body for a moment. Just kind of settling into the body, noticing our posture, noticing how you've landed. And we're not noticing to correct anything or to find the right position. There's no right or correct position. It's just how have you landed? Can you just notice the habitual way that you've landed in your body? And perhaps making just a couple of adjustments, relaxing the muscles in the jaw, relaxing muscles in your face, just relaxing your shoulders, elongating your spine, sitting with a nice tall spine. And noticing if there's any tension in your body. We often hold stress in our musculoskeletal system, in a variety of places, the head, forehead, temples, the neck, the upper back, shoulders, lower back. Pretty common for us to hold stress in all of those places. And if you notice any tension, any discomfort in the body, just simply take a couple of deep breaths and see if you can bring just a little bit of softening of that tension. We're not going to make it go away. That's not the point. But we can notice it, bring awareness to it, kind of call it out. Maybe even say something like, I see you, tension. Our breathing, normal, just a natural rhythm and pace to our breathing. Settling into the body, noticing the weight of our body. Maybe said differently, settling into this force of gravity, this powerful ally that's constantly pulling us and other objects towards the center of the earth. And really getting grounded in this energy called gravity, allowing our bodies to use this gravity to get settled, to create a grounded, centered foundation from which to continue this meditation practice. Now let's bring the focus of our attention to our belly. Might seem a little odd. But at this particular place in our body, the belly, noticing the gentle rise of the belly as we breathe in and the fall of the belly as we breathe out. Maybe described differently, our active attention is on the physical sensation of the breath at this particular place in our body, the belly. And we're calling this mindful attention cycle, skillfully working with distractions, and they will emerge, and it's perfectly normal and it's actually helpful. Remembering curiosity, acceptance, non-judgment, and self-compassion. Another thing to keep in mind is that your breath is your ally. So feel free to take a deep breath at any given time. Just a good way to kind of get anchored again, get settled. Our active attention on the gentle rise and fall of the belly. Let's add one more component to this practice, and it's just a little bit of concentration. And so we're just simply going to label the in-breath and out-breath. So using your inside the head voice, just simply labeling the in-breath and out-breath, saying to yourself something like breathing in, breathing out. Focus of your active attention is still on the gentle rise and fall of the belly as you breathe in and out. Just simply labeling the in-breath and the out-breath. Skillfully working with distractions, recalling these qualities of open curiosity, acceptance, non-judgment, and compassion. Let's take a couple of deep breaths, relax your attention, just simply allow your mind to wander. And just reflect for a moment on how you feel. We're going to come back to that one word drill. What's one word that might describe how you're feeling? One word that might describe your experience in this short meditation practice. Think of that one word, and we're going to finish our practice with sound, and the invitation is just to listen. When the sound ends, our practice will conclude. All right, thanks for participating in that. Maybe you'll go to the chat feature and just drop in the chat feature that one word that describes your experience in this practice. One word, maybe said differently, one word that describes how you're feeling. And again, you're not trying to satisfy me as a trainer. This is just a way of acknowledging, oh man, this was my experience. Can I be curious about that? And can I sort of codify it in the chat feature? Can I just put it in a word and see it on the screen and go, okay, yeah, that's what I thought I felt, and that's what I wrote that I felt. Writing things down is powerful. So, okay. All right, I'm gonna give you a minute to do that.
We've got a lot of comments on the chat, Richard.
Okay, I'm gonna open the chat here. Last time I did that, it disrupted.
Yeah, we got lots of engagement here from people. Over 50 different responses. So great to see people taking the time to just check in and share a word. We appreciate that.
This is a great practice. This one word drill is a great practice that we can use anytime, right? You have a notebook or a scrap piece of paper or a napkin, I mean, just sometimes it's good to check in with yourself. Like, how would I describe where I'm at right now? Boom, here it is, right? Okay, any questions, Jeff, that we can address right now?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of questions have come up, and tell me if it will be useful to answer now or later. But some questions about comparing this practice, which is a bit more of an intensive meditation practice. What have you seen working for people who are in the field, like in a job? How do you incorporate mindfulness into your daily shift?
Yeah, really, really great question. So there's this idea of integration of mindfulness skills. So let's think of, if we can think of meditation as a skills practice, okay? And most of the time we don't necessarily think of it as a skills practice, but meditation is a skills practice of two primary skill domains, awareness and compassion, okay? And we're practicing those skills, we begin to embody those skills. Recall Strozzi Heckler's comment, wisdom really, of knowledge is only rumor, skill is only rumor until it lives in the body. We can embody our skills and then they integrate into the rhythms of our daily lives, both personally and professionally, okay? So with that concept, that philosophy in mind, we have to practice skills in an intensive, disciplined way. And I don't mean discipline like you must meditate every single day. What I mean is we need to actually practice the formal meditation practice if we expect a really solid integration of the skills, okay? So how do we do that? Well, we find ways to integrate formal meditation practice into our training rhythms, okay? And that, for some people who are super intense, that might mean every day. For others, it might mean a few times a week. And for others, it might mean once a week, okay? There's a whole spectrum of possibilities there. But we practice the skills in a formal meditation, much like we just did. And then over time, we begin to embody those skills out in the field. They begin to show up, right? And this is a great opportunity to talk about this slide that I have up here. So mindfulness meditation is a great disruptor of maladaptive coping habits that show up when we're in trauma professions. And one of the things that we know is that we're working with the plasticity of our mind, the what we call neuroplasticity. We used to think that you're 25 years old and your brain's fully developed and then it slowly just degrades from there. And yeah, that sucks, right? That's not true. I mean, we've learned so much about the human brain, the mind over the last couple of decades that what we know is that we can, the brain is pliable. We can train it. And two scientists that are kind of rock stars in neuroscience and psychology, Richie Davidson and Dan Goleman, wrote a book called Altered Traits. And I think I actually have this year wrong. I think the book was published in 2017. But great book that looks at the science of mindfulness. And they looked at some 6,000 research studies across the globe over the last 40 years. And they vetted those down to, I don't know, maybe less than 100 based on, they went at rigorous research methods and replicability and things like that. And then they said, okay, what do we know? What do we know about the science of mindfulness? And one of the things that I want to share with you about the whole book they wrote was these researchers said that there's 4 neural pathways that mindfulness meditation transforms. And let's just talk about these. And this is no particular order, but you know, it's a presentation, so I have to give numbers to things. Responding to disturbing events. So mindfulness meditation can improve our capacity, our skill at responding to disturbing events. This is where stress and trauma and recovery and resilience live. Okay, so we ask, well, how does this show up out in the field? Well, we practice in the dojo. So I like to say we train in the dojo and we fight in the arena. Now, maybe that's a bit dramatic, but it's kind of cool. When we train in the dojo, these skills will show up out in the field. And it's kind of that simple. I never suggest that first responders meditate when they're operating. That is not a responsible way to do business. Now, can you take some deep breaths while you're in movement, while you're rolling your apparatus or your medic wagon or your police rig? Absolutely, right? Can you breathe? Can you pay attention? Can you bring these skills of curiosity, of acceptance, of non-judgment and compassion? Yes, yes. But you're not going to sit in the hood of your police car and meditate. Or worse, you know, sit inside your rig and meditate with your eyes closed, right? So that's not at all what we're suggesting. And I know no one's really asking that. That's not really your question. But we're training to achieve these things. So our skill at responding to disturbing events improves. And these are, anyway, I don't want to get too detailed into the neuroscience here. because it's just not important right now. The second arena is compassion and empathy. Compassion is a skill and it erodes. And frequently as leaders in public safety, we say to our people, I want you to be compassionate. And most of the time, I think if first responders could talk in a space like that, we might say something like, yeah, I'd love to, but I don't care anymore. I'd love to be compassionate, but I don't care. I'm not feeling it, man. And it's not insubordination. That's trauma. That's chronic exposure to human suffering without the resourcing of skills to sustain compassion that show up. Mindfulness training can sustain compassion. And remember, compassion is fierce, it's kind, and it holds boundaries. It's not, oh, everything's cool because I'm compassionate. No, in fact, for the law enforcement officers in the room, it's, I'm compassionate. And because I'm compassionate, I'm holding this boundary. And because I'm holding this boundary, this force is happening. This violence is being delivered skillfully in the greater good because I'm compassionate, not because I'm angry or not because I'm afraid, not because my ego is dysregulated. That's a whole nother conversation. And then also training to empathy, which is separate from compassion. I'm going to hold off on talking about that right now. Attention, obviously, right? Of course, we're getting skillful at those three kinds of attention that we talked about, which is really cool. And then finally, the sense of self. This is the space in which our inner narrative lives. This is the space in which our agency and self-efficacy live. This is really kind of the space where many other things are present here, but growth mindset, our ability to show up and say, I experience life's trauma and I will get injured and it's going to suck, but I will move through it skillfully, right? And these four neural pathways are critically important for us as first responders. I mean, they're important for humans on this planet, right? No matter what we do and where we live. But we learn to embody the skills of mindfulness through really disciplined practice of the skills through meditation. And we can talk about, what's the right dosage and all of that, which is, a great conversation maybe soon at the end of my presentation here. Okay, so I have a number of slides, but I'm going to just move to a couple of slides here and finish up and do some Q&A. I want to touch on compassion here again. This is important. I've been really curious about how do we build a relationship to this idea of compassion? How do we combat a cultural notion that compassion is some of the optional soft stuff? And I mean, years ago, it wasn't even 20 years ago, when we looked at emotional intelligence, which is where compassion lives in a corporate training structure, we'd say, oh, those are soft skills. Let's train to the soft skills. I reject that. Compassion is a badass, hard, disciplined skill that's critically important for us as first responders. End of story. Yeah, I don't know how to say that more strongly. And let me talk about, from a skills perspective, what do we mean when we say compassion? So I have a training team, and for the last 5 or 6 years, we really explored this. And this is a really abbreviated version of where we've landed. We believe practically, okay, not scientifically, and this is not a Webster's definition or American Psychological Association definition. This is just a practical operational way of framing compassion. It's a quality of your relationship to our own and other suffering, a quality of your relationship to your own and other suffering. And it comes from training a set of skills. We actually have 6 skills that we talk about. I'm only going to talk about 3. The first one is awareness. Shouldn't surprise you. Self-awareness, attunement to self, awareness of your body, of your feelings, your emotions, and your thoughts. Okay. The second one, this is kind of the fun one, is distress tolerance and boundary setting. Distress tolerance. We mean the ability to tolerate all kinds of distress. And one way that we train to compassion is working physically hard, getting uncomfortable. And this is for my friends that go to the CrossFit box or have really intense kinds of physical workouts. Yeah, now you can connect that badass workout of the day to compassion training, because it will actually, when you connect it, when you do the compassion work as well, the awareness work as well, and the empathy work, then we're really creating the capacity to be more compassionate and to set boundaries. The third skill is cognitive empathy. It's just another fancy way of saying compassion, but cognitive empathy with a desire to understand the causes and conditions, right? So this is the one skill that really combats the judgment that emerges. Oh, it's just another junkie, another heroin addict, another worthless human who just made shitty choices. Really? Yeah. We erode our humanity when we say things like that, whether we say them out loud or inside our head. That's not being some sort of cool, tough first responder. That's being a dysregulated, trauma-injured first responder. And over time, that is making us sick. Lots of data to support what I just said, right? So, and it makes us cognitively dumber. We take in less objective data, we make sense of fewer available data, and we make less informed decisions when we bring that kind of judgment into our decision making. Yeah. Okay. That was my piece on compassion. And I want to talk about cultivating an inner coach and then come back to just some final pieces. So I just have like maybe 3 more minutes. One of the most important things, this is the sense of self piece that we just talked about in the slide with Richie Davidson and Dan Goleman. We all have an inner narrative. And when we sit still, we have to listen to that. And one of the reasons I'm convinced first responders don't sit still, they don't sit in stillness, they don't reflect, they don't meditate, is because it's really difficult to be inside our own head with all of the incessant noise, the trauma noise, just the normal personal human negative noise. But here's the beautiful thing. We can learn to sit in that space, find the signal in that noise, and reflect with the curiosity and the compassion and the non-judgment and the acceptance in a way that transforms our relationship to self. It gets us more skillful, that literally transforms the way that we think, our patterns of thinking that are often negative and judgmental, towards what I like to refer to as the inner coach. It takes time and it takes effort, and it's never perfect. Yet, when we come to ourselves and sit with the kind of warrior discipline and courage, things begin to change. But it's uncomfortable at first. That's the reality. But you're good at being uncomfortable. Here's the irony. All of you are skillful. You're badass warriors in spaces that most people would never want to go. So you've demonstrated your courage and your commitment. And my challenge to you is, can we pivot that energy to yourself for a bit? Try out this mindfulness meditation. Come to that with courage, because you're not going to like it at first. Cultivate the inner coach. Okay. I'm just going to zip through some slides, so forgive me, because we're not going to talk about a lot of this stuff. We just don't have time. I'm going to just get to this. Okay. Here's the key takeaways. 1, we can change our inner narrative by cultivating a growth mindset. Right? I am not a victim of trauma. Trauma is not something that happens to me. Trauma is something I've chosen to experience, and I can get good at it. I know stress injury will happen, and I will train before it, and I will take informed actions towards interventions in response to trauma injuries that I'm noticing emerge. And I know these interventions are critically important. Mindfulness is a foundational organic technology that can shift my relationship to the world around me, to myself, and make me a healthier, more humane, and more competent professional and human being. Ultimately, we're training awareness and compassion skills that are the gateway to optimal self and optimal performance. Jeff?
Awesome, Richard. That's awesome. We're going to let that sink in for these moments while we reflect. And I'm going to welcome people who are with us. If there's questions that are popping up for them, put them into the chat. We're going to do our best to get to them. We do have a number of questions here that we're going to start off with. Richard, you've worked with a ton of organizations, first responder organizations. What are some common barriers you've seen to entry and responses once you've gotten through the door? And kind of the next follow-up question is, how do we get in the door more skillfully? How do we kind of get buy-in from leaders in these organizations?
Oh, yeah. So barriers to entry, obstacles. I think that, okay, so these are fighting words, so stand by. Sometimes the greatest obstacles I experience is the leadership of public safety. We have very senior leaders who I think that often have their own ways of coping. They've coped with trauma all the way to the top of their organizations, and they've probably done it in not so healthy ways. And they have very myopic views of occupational stress and trauma. And the neuroscience and the mindfulness paradigm is not one they want to accept. And so therefore, there's a lot of pushback at senior leadership levels. Now that's beginning to change. The second barrier is funding. And there's also the first responder paradigm of how we train is probably the greatest barrier. If we could convince leaders that, yes, let's do this. If we can convince funding organizations, yes, let's do this. What we often want is can we do a 2-hour session of mindfulness and now everybody's good? That's nonsense. And I don't use words like nonsense very often. Usually I have some really colorful other word that I use. We don't understand the difficulty, the depth, and the commitment required here. Mindfulness skills training is unlike any other kind of training that we do. It requires more energy and more time and more integrated effort than anything I've ever seen in law enforcement as a police officer or as an observer of the fire service and emergency medicine. There's culturally, there's some other things going on here. There is still some stigma. Someone asked me recently in a training, when is mindfulness going to get over the hippie leftist stigma? And I said, that's already over. The real question is, when are you going to get over it? Right? And so I suspect that you'd be really hard pressed to find a space in my training that we've just done together where you could accuse me of being a hippie. Now, okay, I'm from Portland, Oregon, so okay, boom, there you go. But nothing I've talked about has been soft. Nothing I've talked about has been anything other than here's some science, here's some skills, and here's some badass application of that, right? We have to move beyond our own aversions to doing the deep work of what it means to be a dedicated, skillful first responder.
How does it work for you, the parallel between physical fitness? We have a certain level often in these professions to have a certain level of physical fitness, to also have a certain level of mental fitness. And if we're starting to look at mindfulness as a certain, in the lens of mental fitness, how does that sit with you? And is that a way that you found helpful in presenting this?
I think that one of the greatest disservices that we've done in the first responder world when we talk about occupational trauma is to separate mental and physical fitness. There's no separation. It's, I would submit to you that, and I talk to a lot of first responders who, they're what I would describe as gym rats, right? They're just super fit but they never spend time just cultivating an awareness of what's going on, even in their own bodies, which is odd. And so training in the mind is just the next frontier of physical fitness. It's the next frontier of performance. And in a beautiful way, it brings us back to the humanity. And so if we can see these things as not separate, but they're all integrated into one human experience, then maybe we kind of frame things differently and we can understand how my thoughts in my head integrate, my awareness of those, my skillful regulation of those integrate into, my efforts to build strength with various applications of, movement, weightlifting, body strength, whatever.
Awesome. I'm gonna ask. I've got a question for our audience, and I'm gonna ask them what's one word that's coming up that they're taking away from our session together. As you digest Richard's presentation, what's one word that's sticking with you, coming to the surface that you're feeling sticky? So if you can have a think about that one word that you're walking away with, put that into the chat. That would be great. We've got a question here, Richard, about have there been studies related to cost of regular mental wellness training and reducing the cost of absenteeism related to stress injuries? The age-old question of how to measure this type of training.
Yeah, there's not good studies. I think, there's been some studies in the last 15 years published around workplace wellness programs and the return on investment, and they're really positive. I mean, there's a study out of Harvard, I don't know, 12 years ago that, suggested, this is in the corporate world, but, people are people, organizations are organizations, that suggested that, every dollar spent on wellness returned, like $1.6. And those are things that we look at, from a nerd, return on investment standpoint. There's not good data in the first responder world. And part of the reason is because the institutions of first responders make it so difficult to do research. And by the way, I'm a researcher too. So I'm an affiliate faculty at Pacific University. I'm in the middle of a significant National Institutes of Health study in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Madison, Wisconsin, and the whole state of Oregon. Published author, done lots of research. So I know that game. And one of the things that we need research. We need economic research, and it doesn't exist. But here's what I'll tell you. So I like to point to the possibility of extrapolation. So here's what we know with mindfulness-based resilience training is what we call it in the research world. 8 weeks of training. We're teaching skills to cops. Let's talk about police because that's where the research is right now. We're reducing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. We're reducing anger and aggression. We're improving sleep. We're improving pain management. Notice we don't make pain go away. We get good at pain. What else are we doing? Improving skills in compassion and empathy. Regulating cortisol levels, significant. Okay, and then we look at the data surrounding all those data points I just gave you. What we know is that we're going to make an impact on the business costs of trauma in the first responder world. There's no question. The thing is, though, here's my challenge to first responder leaders, and you're all leaders. No matter, your rank is not relevant. And I know we have a variety of ranks here in this talk today. My challenge to you is, can you lead forward without needing 6 academic studies to support what you're doing? I mean, I have little patience for leaders who are like, well, give me some research and I'll do this. We're way beyond the need for research. Look around you. Look at the suffering that's happening. Look at the rates of PTSD. Look at the rates of suicide. Look at the rates of duty-related illness deaths. And there's studies for all that, right? But now we want studies to prove that it's okay for me to want to invest in mindfulness because maybe I just don't have the courage to do it. Yeah, I said that out loud.
Thank you, Richard. And we appreciate your being upfront and frank with us and in your comments today. I think it's part of the way of getting through to a lot of different populations, especially this population that might some people might have some reservations. And we're getting to the time to our time together. I'd like to share kind of two quotes that stuck out to me, and just as a final wrap up. Firstly, just acknowledge everybody for being with us today, taking the time. For some of you, this is new. This was outside of the box, made you feel uncomfortable. So good for you for joining. And for those of you who it is more in your comfort zone, hopefully it's empowered you a little bit more to go back to your peers and your teams and your organizations, and to maybe bring an initiative like this forward. We definitely have, there's a lot of our MindWell clients on the call that they have training that they can go to. And if you're not part of one of those organizations, or there's information that we can share with you to access some training. So two of my favorite quotes that stuck out, and this is paraphrasing a little bit, but compassion's a badass, hard skill necessary for first responders. We'll take that one home for me. And the second one, which is a bit of reflection for you, was around mindfulness is a great disruptor for maladaptive coping mechanisms. Mindfulness is a great disruptor for maladaptive coping mechanisms. I hope I got that accurate. And so maybe we can take that as a reflection and think, what's one of our maladaptive coping mechanisms? AKA bad habits. And if mindfulness is a great disruptor for that, and if we actually sink into that, something that's in our life that we want to change, maybe we can use this as motivation to practice, to do our mindfulness practice. So once again, a big bow of thanks to all of our partners on our call today, all of you for your attention, for being here, to TPS for sharing it, the Toronto Police Service, and mostly to Richard for spending this time with us and sharing all his practice, his experience, and wisdom with us. And Richard, I'll just give you a final word before we sign off.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks everyone for showing up. And it takes courage to step into this work. You all have the necessary courage to begin to pay more attention. Explore what MindWell-U has for you. If you want to reach me, you can find me at mindfulbadge.com. I'm happy to respond to emails and create some conversations. And there's some information there you might find helpful about studies, and if you want to kind of nerd out on this stuff. But the one thing you can do is just move forward. Remember this idea of some self-compassion, that the shit you experience it's going to happen. It's normal, and interventions are important. So if you haven't seen your medical doc in the last year, make an appointment, go. If you haven't seen a mental health clinician, consider finding one. And you can learn more about how to find one on my website, or I'm sure Jeff's got some resources. Take some actions, decide what those are. And thanks again for being here. Appreciate the work y'all do.
Awesome. Big day in the world today. We wish everybody a peaceful and hopefully happy day. See you soon, everybody. We've got another webinar coming up actually pretty quickly, February 3rd. We'll send a link in the chat that you can sign up for that one as well on performance. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.